and welcome to another evening in the lives of the Vaishnavacharyas. My name is Chaturatma Das. Before we jump ahead here, give me that chat room page again, would you, Abhay? Before we jump ahead here, I just wanted to make a point on a comment that I see going on in the chat room there between Scott, Kevan, and Mauricio. Well, Mauricio just joined in. But Srila Prabhupada had a very nice quote, and it was that religion without philosophy is sentimentality, and philosophy without religion is mental speculation. So this is an important reference to the point that Scott and Kevan in the chat room were discussing about faith and religion and sentiment and like that. So that was Prabhupada's angle on the whole thing. So let us know, those of you in the chat room, how everything is. Last week we had a little bit of a technical difficulty, and we think we're on top of that. So just give us feedback and let us know how everything is. The fact that you're commenting on what I said indicates to me that everything's good. So we appreciate it. Scott, good to have you with us. Kevan, nice to have you again. Mauricio, there's our main guy. All right, so tonight we're going to do an assortment of Vaishnavas. Sometimes when you go to the candy store, you can buy just the, well, let's do the nut store. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Candy either way. You can buy just the almonds, or if you like, you can buy just the Brazil nuts. Some people particularly like to buy just the cashews. Myself, I'm a filbert, hazelnut guy. But what you can also do is they have a section where they let you do the mixed nuts. And they mix it all together there. And they put all different kinds, and then you can get one bunch that's got everything mixed in it. So tonight we're going to mix up a little bit here and talk about different Vaishnavas. And we're going to stick with the P's and the R's. We've been in that vein for a little bit. We're going to talk tonight about Sri Purushottama Thakura, Sri Raghava Pandit, and Sri Raghunandana Pandit. Now, one of the reasons in this is because there are many very prominent Vaishnavas in our line. And these, of course, we spent time speaking about Shyamananda, Srinivasacharya, Narottam Das Thakur. We covered the 6 Goswamis. These are very prominent, Haridas Thakur, Advaitacharya. But there are many, many Vaishnavas in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes that are actually prominent and actually have a significant role in his Leela, but not as large of a role from front to finish as, say, someone like the Goswamis, or someone like Advaitacharya, or someone such as Nityananda, right? Or as significant of a secondary role as the second generation devotees such as Narottam, Srinivas, like that. These devotees nonetheless have specific purposes to fulfill and a particular exchange with the Lord that gives specific meaning to their life, to their activities. So some of these devotees we speak about here and that we're going to speak about over the next period of time will be such Vaishnavas as this. So today we're going to start off with Purushottama Thakura. Now, of course, many of these devotees, as we speak about them, will include and discuss with them other Vaishnavas that are intricate and interrelated, or that are junior or senior to them, but a part of their Leela. In the pastimes of Sri Purushottama Thakura, we have such a scenario. We're going to quote extensively from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is the prominent literature source on these activities. Purushottama Thakura, Raghava Pandit, and Raghunandana Thakura, the prominent sources of information about these two are these three, the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Chaitanya Bhagavat, with supplemental information from the Bhakti Ratnakar. So these are the three prominent literatures that we find. So, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the Adi Leela, by the way, is just chock full of information about the different Vaishnavas of Gaura Leela, particularly the second volume. This is where Prabhupada gives a lot of biographical information as he goes through the tree of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he mentions there the 23rd and the 24th branches of the tree of Lord Nityananda, and Lord Nityananda is one of the main trunks of the tree devotional service, are these two devotees, Sadashiva Kaviraj and his son Purushottama Das. Purushottama Das, in addition to being a prominent personality in the tree of Lord Nityananda's devotional service, is also also the 10th of the 12 Gopal disciples. As you may remember, the cowherd boyfriends of Lord Balaram, a rough and tumble group of boys. And so when Balaram came as Nityananda, they all wanted to come along for the fun. You got a group of guys that are buddies, and one goes, and hey, we all want to go. So in the same way, when Balaram was going to incarnate as Lord Nityananda, he brought all of his buddies with him. And these were called the 12 dasa Gopals. The dasa means 12, but the 12 cowherd boys, the dasa Gopals. And so these 12 cowherd boys had different personalities, and the 10th one of them was this devotee, Purushottama Das. Now, it mentions that since his birth, Purushottama Das was always merged in the service at the lotus feet of Lord Nityananda. And we spoke a few weeks ago discussing the prayers of Narottam Das Thakur, how Narottam Das Thakur writes that the lotus feet of Lord Nityananda are like millions of moons. So we can just imagine someone whose very life, their entire heart, is simply absorbed in being there as a servant and engaged in assisting Sri Nityananda Ram. And so it mentions that all of his childhood playing, all of his activities in his youth were all the pastimes of Lord Krishna. So this was what a personality he was. Many times we find that the child gives glory to the parent. We see this even in our modern times. Sometimes you'll see a young personality in our ISKCON society that is just a wonderful individual. We say, oh, yes, that boy gives credit to his parents. I'm sitting across someone right here. A boy is such a nice, steady individual, and he assists every week in here. I can count on him. So this is a credit to his parents. So in the same way, Purushottama was said to be the good fortune that came from his father. Actually, the verse from Chaitanya Bhagavad is that Sri Sadashiva Kaviraj was extremely fortunate. His son's name was Purushottama Das. He was never externally conscious of his material body, even for a moment. Now, that's quite an amazing thing. Each of us, we are completely conscious of our material body. As I'm sitting here and speaking about these personalities, I'm conscious of the fact that my socks are too tight on my feet, and that as a result, my toes are pressing tightly against the socks, and it's a little bit uncomfortable. Now, for a person on the Transcendental platform, they don't even notice such things. Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, they were not even aware when they were eating and sleeping. Completely, oh, we forgot to sleep today. Look, the day's going on, it's 23 hours we've been up. Oh, we should take a little snap. So this is the difference in consciousness between being completely conscious in the material body and being unconscious. Purushottama Das was never for a moment conscious of his external material body, always absorbed in the internal service to Sri Nityananda Ram. And it mentions that so much so was he like that Nityananda Chandra enacted his pastimes in the heart of Purushottama. Just imagine. This means that Purushottama's entire existence, his entire thought, was there in the pastimes of Lord Nityananda. So wonderful. So wonderful. Purushottama, we mentioned he was one of the 10 cowherd boyfriends. He was the cowherd boy Stoka Krishna. Stoka Krishna, one of the 10 prominent associates there. Now, it mentions also that there were 4 generations of his family that were advanced devotees. First of all, of course, his grandfather. It mentions that they were not only advanced, but they were eternally perfect, direct associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So his grandfather was Kamsari Sen. He was an eternal associate of the Lord. Then his father, Sadashiva Kaviraj. Then he himself, Purushottama Thakura. And then his son, who we'll hear about later, Kanai Thakur. They were all absorbed in the pastimes of the Lord. And it mentions in the Gaura Gonadesha Dipika, you remember we've mentioned this book many, many, many times. This is a valuable literature given to us by Kavi Karnapur. And in this literature, Kavi Karnapur describes the different personalities of Gaura Lila and who they were in Chaitanya Lila. And in this book, he describes Kamsari Sen, the grandfather of Purushottama Das, as Ratnavali Shaki. Ratnavali Shaki was one of the prominent gopis. And his father, Sadashiva, is Chandravali. Now, Chandravali, as I said that, Abai went, wow. He knows. Chandravali was immediately absorbed in I'm sorry, I got sidetracked by something in the chat room there, excuse me. Chandravali was completely, how do you say, left wing, right wing from Radharani. Radharani had her mood of gopis, and Chandravali had her mood and her gopis. And a little obstacle was always there, you know, a little contrast. We'll go into that some other time. But at any rate, this was the personality. So, such great individuals were there in the family line of Purushottama. Now, it mentions that from the time Purushottama was a small boy, he was always dedicated to constantly meditating on the service of Sri Nityananda Prabhu. So, even as a child, we mentioned he was dreaming in this way, and his heart was in this way, and he was engaged in the service. And as he grew up in the same way, he was always absorbed like this. Chaitanya Bhagavat describes that Sadashiva Kaviraj was always amazed at watching his son and seeing the pastimes of his son and how he would enact these different leelas with his children, you know, keeping the memory of Lord Nityananda always alive. They're described in the two of them, Sadashiva and Purushottama, are described in the Chaitanya Bhagavat as Mahabhagyavan. Mahabhagyavan means greatly fortunate personalities. Bhagyavan, very elevated person, you know, very, very elevated. Mahabhagyavan, very greatly fortunate. They actually belong to a Vaidya caste of Vaidya caste of physicians, of doctors, and they were engaged. We find that many of Lord Chaitanya's associates are from this class because this class of associates, these doctors, they were actually upper class in one sense, although upper class in the sutras. They're kind of interesting. They were considered, doctors are not considered such an elevated thing. Nowadays, of course, if you're a doctor, big personality, and you make hundreds of millions of dollars and drive fancy cars and have multiple homes and, you know, charge huge amounts of money for someone just to come in and stick out their tongue at you, you know. But in the times of Mahaprabhu, they were not considered to be such elevated people. Why? Because they dealt with the circumstances of the body. They were completely absorbed in what's wrong with the body, how do we make the body well, how do we cure the body, how do we make you comfortable in the body. So this wasn't considered a very advanced state. Of course now, because the whole society is based upon you are the body, therefore anybody that helps you understand how to enjoy the body is a great personality. So this is the difference there. Now, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Srila Prabhupada gives this little background about the family line of Purushottama and his soon-to-come son, Prabhupada begins to mention, as you regularly find in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, how if you go on such and such train to this stop and get off at this stop and take the local bus number so-and-so to this intersection, then you get down and walk half a kilometer, and on your right-hand side you'll find a kadamba tree, and beneath that kadamba tree is the samadhi of so-and-so. The Chaitanya Charitamrita is filled with different little tidbits of information like this. This was given to us by Srila Prabhupada, but we owe it in debt to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who set out these guidelines of the different holy places and where they were. So this is one of the important aspects of our historical circumstances. Because as we're speaking here over these last few weeks about the different personalities, when you go to the holy places, you want to know where to find the sites associated with them. There are many devotees who live in India, and all they do, and I take the dust of their feet on my head, is just go to these different holy places and find them out. Where is this one? Who did this here? What happened at this place? Like that. Because the Dham is filled with these endless pastimes. So to have this information is essential in the development of a well-rounded picture of where our Vaishnava line comes from. It is very, very important. So we very much appreciate when we read. And then Prabhupada will also tell, previously at this site there used to be a grand temple, but over the course of time the land changed hands and it was destroyed, and now there's just a small little hut there, whatever like that. You know, that's what he describes, the 2 or 3 paragraphs here about the descendants and the deities and all associated with Purushottama. So in this way, Prabhupada gives a little indication there. Now, after Purushottama grew up, of course, as was most of the situations, he got married. His wife's name was Janava. And in due course of time, as is the circumstance with a husband and wife, they bore a child, and that child was Kanai Krishna. Unfortunately, very, very shortly after giving birth to Kanai, mother passed away. Janava departed from this world. And so Purushottama was there, left with just caring for this child Kanai by himself. Nityananda heard that Purushottama Thakur's wife has passed away. He has this young child. How will he raise the child? So Nityananda went and he brought the child to his own home. Because at the time he was married to Janava Mata and Vasudha. And in this way he brought him. Now it mentions elsewhere in the Chaitanya literatures that Purushottama was adopted by Janava Mata. Kanai was adopted by Janava Mata. And Nityananda first of all took him with him when he was just a little boy, and took him to his own village of Kadadaha. And this is where, of course, his family was, and he stayed there and attended the Rath Yatras with Nityananda and his family. And Nityananda was so impressed with the faith and the devotion manifested in this young boy Kanai Thakur that he gave him the name Shishu Krishnadas. So Purushottama's son Kanai was motherless, was taken in by Nityananda, adopted by Janava Mata, and given the name Shishu Krishnadas. So very, very amazing. So when he was 5 years old, Janava Mata, of course, by this time I mentioned that Nityananda had departed from this world. And when he was 5 years old, Janava Mata went to Vrindavan. And when she went to Vrindavan, she took Kanai with her, Shishu Krishnadas. Now this is interesting because we think, you know, geez, he's, you know, just a little 5-year-old boy. But, you know, it's not uncommon. I had the great fortune of when I was fortunate enough to be on Padayatra in India and walk from Rishikesh up to Badrinath, that we had one little 5-year-old boy with us that walked that entire distance. That little 5-year-old boy now lives here in our community. He's a very prominent devotee in our community. His name is Gaur Shakti. 5 years old, he walked from Rishikesh all the way up to Badrinath in the Himalayas. So 5-year-olds can accomplish quite a bit. So Janava Mata took him like this to Vrindavan with him. And Jiva Goswami and all the other Goswamis were very, very impressed with the level of devotion of this young child. They thought he was just so nice, so they called him Kanai Thakur. He was just Kanu before that, and then Nityananda called him Shisha Krishnadas, so that's when he got the name Kanai, and he became Kanai Thakur. So this is what they called him. And Kanai Thakur was always going about Vrindavan with the devotees, dancing in ecstasy, chanting and dancing, and in this way it was very, very wonderful. So this was his pastime in this way while he was there in Vrindavan. Kaviraj Goswami remarks about Purushottama that his son, Kanai Thakur, was a very respectable gentleman and was the son of Purushottama Das Thakur. He was such a great devotee that the Lord always lived within his body. So like father, like son. What's that they say? Fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. So Purushottama, the Lord Nityananda, lived within his heart. And so his son, it mentions that Lord Krishna lived within his heart. And his devotion was equal to that of his father. Now, interesting word that Kaviraj Goswami uses, respectable gentleman. It's not a word thrown about very commonly. You'll see in the Chaitanya Charitamrita the word gentleman is used only when it's referring to the most qualified of individuals in this way. Excuse me. just caught a picture on the monitor, and when I take a drink of water, that green bottle is the most effulgent thing around. I should get a cup or something. All right. So, in the book Prem Vilas, we've spoken about the book Prem Vilas, which is about one of the second generation pastime books of the Lord. In that book, it mentions that Kanai Thakur was present at the grand festival in Keturi, which Mother Janava, of course, he was the adopted son of Janava Mata, so to speak. So when he came back, of course, they went back to Bengal, and then he attended with her the festival. Big list of so many names the devotees are given there that attended that festival, and so he also attended that. And Vrindavan Das Thakur also describes that he was one of the Purushottama, again, he mentions him as one of the prominent associates of Lord Nityananda. So here we have Chaitanya Bhagavat, Chaitanya Bhakti Ratnakar, Gaur Gonadesha Dipika, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, all four confirming the advanced and exalted position of Purushottama Das. And it mentions that many of the associates of Lord Nityananda, due to their close association with him, many miraculous things took place. Once it's stated that Purushottama, by some circumstance, it doesn't give the exact circumstance, but took some snake poison. He ingested some snake poison, and he was in such a trance of ecstasy that even though this snake poison being in his system, it had no impact on him at all. And he just continued in his devotional ecstasies, and then, you know, the kirtan finished and like that, and somehow or another this happened. And it mentions it was greatly astonishing to everyone that witnessed this, but that these type of miraculous activities were quite common in the devotees of Nityananda. As Purushottama became older, it mentions he had three very prominent disciples. The first was Sri Madhvacharya, not the Madhvacharya we spoke about last week, but Madhvacharya of Chaitanya Lila, Sri Yadavacharya, and Devaki Nandana Das, these three. Now the interesting thing is that Madhvacharya became the husband of the daughter of Lord Nityananda, Ganga Devi. You remember Lord Nityananda had a daughter named Ganga Devi and a son named Virabhadra. And the daughter Ganga Devi married Purushottama's disciple, Madhvacharya. And then the disciple Devaki Nandana, he was the author of a very, very important book that glorified all the Vaishnavas of the Kolia district. This was an area, Srikanda and all are in this part of part of Bengal, where many, many, many exalted devotees came from. And Devaki Nandana put together a book. The name of this book, Vaishnava Vandana. The Vaishnava Vandana. This was a book he wrote that glorified all the devotees from this part of Bengal. And there's a very, very nice passage in here where Devaki Nandana writes about Purushottama's father. And I'd like to read that in closing here. I worship Sadashiva Kaviraj with great attentiveness. He was constantly intoxicated with love of God and had no external consciousness. I bow down to my worshipable Lord and Master Purushottama Thakura. Who can list the incomparable qualities of Purushottama Thakura? He was merciful to those who were devoid of virtue, displaying the natural power of his compassion on all beings. When only 7 years old, he was so intoxicated with love for Krishna that he enchantingly danced in such a way to attract the entire world. So these are the appreciations by Devaki Nandana, the disciple of Purushottama, of both Purushottama and his father Sadashiva. And just a little bit of information available about these two. So, very nice there. Let me just take a quick look here at what's going on in the chat room before we move on. Do we have, everything's working okay? Okay, just some refreshing, good. So we're going to move on now. One of my favorite devotees. Raghava Pandit. I don't know how many of you out there know the name Raghava Pandit. Raghava Pandit was one of the three most intimate associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Very, very important personality. But I want to read you a few quotes from the Gaur Gonadesha Dipika.
May I ask a question really quick?
Yes, Abai.
Who the other two were? The other two? Intimate
I'll get to those.
Okay.
They're there. Yes, yes. Okay, so we're going to read a couple of quotes from the Gaura-Gunadesha Dipika and the Chaitanya Charitamrita, giving some appreciation of Raghava Pandit. This is from Gaura-Gunadesha Dipika. The Gopi Dhanishta, whose service was to bring unlimited amounts of food to Krishna in Braj, has now appeared in Gauranga's Leela as his dear servant Raghava Pandit. His sister Damayanti was Gunamali in Krishna Leela as well. So brother and sister, both very, very devoted to the service of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because in the service of Krishna this was their same activity, to prepare the food. In Krishna Leela, Dhanishta Devi would take Krishna's prasadam to Radharani on Jasoda Mata's order. Radharani would then lovingly take that prasadam, and Mahaprabhu, who was none other than Krishna in the mood of Radharani, similarly accepted the offerings of food made by Dhanishta's incarnation, Raghava Pandit. So we see that some of the men in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes are greatly renowned for their cooking abilities. Raghava Pandit's home was Panihati. Now we've spoken about Panihati before. We'll speak more about his involvement here with the activities famous there. That is the Chirdai festival. But the village of Panihati is a very, very sweet place. Even nowadays, if you go there, it's a very quiet, peaceful, it's on the outskirts of Calcutta. It's like a far-reaching suburb of Calcutta. And very, very nice place. So this was the birthplace there on the eastern banks of the Ganga. And in this way, Krishnadas Kaviraj writes that Mahaprabhu permanently resided in the home of Raghava Pandit. We'll see a little later there's also 3 places where Mahaprabhu always resided. We'll find out what those are. Raghava Pandit is mentioned as the 7th branch in the tree of Mahaprabhu's service. One of the most important primary followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Lord's manifestation constantly was seen in 3 places. So these are the 3 places, those of you who are making notes out there, these are the 3 places that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu always resided. One of them is the home of Sachimata. He would always stay in the home of Sachimata, and even when he was residing in Puri, she would see him present and accepting her offerings. The second place was the pastimes anywhere that Lord Nityananda was dancing. Any place Lord Nityananda was dancing, then we would see that Lord Chaitanya was there. And the third place was the house of Raghava Pandit. So these were the 3 places that we always found the Lord to be associated with. And this was because Chaitanya Charitamrita mentions of the love that was present for him by his devotees in each of these places. Vrindavan Thakur's writings on Chaitanya Leela, and particularly on Raghava Pandit in his Chaitanya Bhagavat, indicates very clearly how dear Raghava Pandit was to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That when the Lord of his life came toward his home in Panihati from the house of Srivas in Kumarahat, Raghava Pandit fell down on the ground seeing the Lord coming in great joy and satisfaction in his arrival in his home. When the Lord of Vaikuntha, it mentions, Mahaprabhu himself, saw Raghava Pandit's devotion, he blessed Raghava Pandit, and saying to him, I have come to the house of Raghava Pandit and have forgotten all my distress simply by seeing him. I feel the same pleasure here that I do when I take a refreshing bath in the Ganges. Now this has some very great significance in it. The example is given of bathing in the Ganges and this being very refreshing. Now, a bath in the Ganges can be refreshing on 2 counts. Externally, it can be refreshing and cleansing the body, because the Ganga is a little bit chilly, comes from the Himalayas, the water is a little cool, and by dipping into it, one becomes very refreshed and cleansed. But additionally, on the spiritual platform, the nature of the Ganges is that it removes the sins that are binding the heart of the living entity, that are dragging the living entity down into a conditioned mentality. So by taking that bath, one becomes freed in that way. So similarly, Mahaprabhu is comparing the vision of Raghava Pandit and the arrival at Raghava Pandit's home, both in the same way, that he becomes completely relieved and enlivened by this. So the Lord often told Raghava Pandit that he would cook to cook for him. He would instruct him like that because he knew Raghava Pandit was an excellent cook. And of course, Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna and Brajendranandana. And he would remember the pastimes of Raghava Pandit from his other Leela. So he'd always encourage him like that. Always encourage him to cook, to cook. So he appreciated, it mentions one particular reason he appreciated Raghava Pandit's cooking, because his preparations were soaked with devotion. And we spoke about this a little bit earlier, is that the the service that a devotee offers is accepted by the Lord, but what's more accepted is the mood of devotion the devotee has with that. Just like if one is cooking for the Lord, the amount of bhakti that goes into the meditation of preparing that food is what one will become very satisfied with. Even if one has such great bhakti, one may overlook the imperfection in preparation. There's that wonderful story about Akura. No, not Akura. Vidura, there we go. That when Vidura greeted Krishna and brought him into his home, he was so overcome in the ecstasy that he was preparing bananas to give to the Lord, and in his ecstasy he gave the banana peels to Krishna by mistake. But Krishna was so touched by the devotion that was present, he accepted those. So in this way, the Lord would always request that the preparations of Raghava Pandit were so soaked with devotion that he requested him to cook. And Raghava Pandit would cook, and he would feed the Lord, who would eat with great enthusiasm. Now, I don't know how many of you listening or in the chat room there are cooks, or have had the opportunity to see people take Purushottama. I used to run a restaurant in St. Louis, the Temple Restaurant there. And there's nothing as satisfying as seeing a room full of people enthusiastically taking Purushottama. Now, my wife was the cook there, and she's still a great cook. And when she sees devotees so happily eating something she's made, oh, it gives such joy to her heart. So this is the way Raghava Pandit felt. He saw the enthusiasm with which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took the Purushottama, and this left him feeling very, very happy. Very, very happy. So, now, it mentions also that, of course, if Mahaprabhu was eating there, that Nityananda would be there. And Nityananda would also come sometimes, and he would eat at Raghava's house. And Nityananda would come with all of his associates. Now, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we know, is a bit more of a proper Brahmana. He was a bit more properly behaved. But we see that Nityananda, no one knows his caste. No one is quite sure where he comes from. And his activities are a bit Avadhuta-like. So his enthusiasm for taking Purushottama is always very widely shown, very verbally exclaimed. There's so many different Purushottama pastimes of the Lord Nityananda. So in the same way, when he would come to take the Purushottama at the home of Raghava Pandit, he would really, really make sure that Raghava knew he enjoyed it so much. Now, it also mentions in this that one of the particular favorites of Mahaprabhu from the hand of Raghava Pandit was his spinach preparations. Spinach preparations were very much liked. It mentions that as Raghava Pandit grew in his spiritual devotion, he, of course, accepted disciples. This is not a new thing that we accept disciples. And Makar Devaj Kara, this is his name, Makar Devaj Kara was the most prominent among the disciples of Raghava Pandit. And he also lived in Panihati, of course. Raghava Pandit didn't travel extensively, he just stayed in Panihati. And it was his job, because Raghava Pandit would prepare these bags of Purushottama. We're going to get into that in just a little bit here. But his disciple, Makara Devaja, that's a tough name, Makara Devaja Das. Your name is Makara Devaja Das. There we go. So Makara Devaja's service to his guru Raghava Pandit was to carry these bags of Purushottama from Panihati to Jagannath Puri for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's enjoyment. Now, what were these bags? Very amazing. As we mentioned, Raghava Pandit's sister, Damayanti, was also an excellent cook. And Damayanti was the Lord's dear maidservant, as we mentioned previously in Krishna Lila, cooking for him. And in this same pastime, she was also cooking. So she would gather various different ingredients that were particularly exclusive to Bengal. It's just like if you live in one part of the country, you know, you get a particular type of fruit that you only get there. Like here in Alachua, I can actually grow bananas. There's one devotee here I heard grows papaya. Now, if you happen to live in St. Louis, there's no chance you've grown bananas or papaya. So if you're sending some special treat up to someone in St. Louis, you might send some papaya, some fresh grown papaya like that. So in this way, there were foods that were specific to Bengal, and Damayanti Mataji would prepare these foods very, very nicely. And she would make all kinds of condiments and sweets and different types of savories and things of this nature. And it was described that the food that she made was unparalleled and therefore just perfect and suitable for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So then she would take all of these and pack them in different clay pots and in different types of leaf plates and in different types of leaf containers. Sometimes they take leaf containers and put some dry savories and fold it over and then pin it with toothpicks and things like that, little twigs and all of these different arrangements, and then they would pack them into these different bags. Now, I don't know about the temples where the devotees who are listening in are living, but in our temple here, we have to lock up the Mahaprasadam. All of the Maha sweets from Radha Shyam Sundar have to be kept carefully under lock and key. And this is an age-old tradition. As long as I've been a devotee since the early 70s, the Mahaprasad has been locked and secured. Because devotees have great eagerness to take that Mahaprasad. So imagine word gets around that there's these incredible bags of Raghava. So this Makaradvajakara, he was the superintendent of these bags. He was placed with the sole responsibility, no one touches these bags of Raghava. They were called the Raghava Jalaveri, the bags of Raghava. No one touches these bags. These are exclusively for Mahaprabhu. Because sometimes they say even to steal Mahaprasadam is okay. So these were exclusive, and this was the job of his disciple to take these. So they would arrange every year, and they would carry these to Jagannath Puri, and these would be given to Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya was so happy upon receiving them. Now, there's a wonderful pastime from the other side of the coin when Mahaprabhu received these, because his servant Govinda, Mahaprabhu was very strictly following Vrata. I have my dear friend Indradumna Maharaj, who I have the great fortune to travel and associate with quite regularly. And most of the time when I go to see him, he's always fasting. He's on some 27-day juice fast, or, you know, some 3-week lemon juice and firewater purification fast. And when he goes to Vrindavan, he hardly eats anything. But every once in a while, it's like, Maharaj, the disciples are complaining, they're cooking nice prasad. All right, I'll eat something like that. So in the same way, Mahaprabhu was following this strict vrata. Raghava Pandit was bringing these bags, and so much prasadam Raghava Pandit brought, and this is right in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there was an entire room filled with all this prasadam. And so Govinda was complaining. Govinda was the personal servant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Govinda complained. He said, my dear Lord, all the devotees are bringing prasadam, and they're asking me, is the Lord eating? And I'm having to say, yes, the Lord is enjoying it very much. And you're not eating anything, and the room is just getting more full and more full. What am I supposed to do? So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, all right, I will begin to take this prasadam. And it describes that these bags of Raghava were taken by the Lord and honored for one entire year. One entire year. The special prasadam from the hand of Raghava Pandit and the special cooking of his sister Damayanti was honored and appreciated by the Lord in this way. It's a very, very wonderful pastime, these bags of Raghava. Now, we're going to fire up the juices here. We're going to read from Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's description of the ingredients of the bags of Raghava. So this is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It describes as follows. Damayanti would prepare shukta for the Lord because she worried that he might have problems with his digestion. Mahaprabhu was overjoyed to receive these preparations that were offered with such affection. Now, an interesting parallel is given here, that the devotees, how did they think of the personality of Godhead having indigestion? But Damayanti was only concerned as a motherly kind of mood. Oh, he's eating this time and irregular and that, and he's traveling. He might have, let me give him something to help him with his digestion. So she was preparing shukta like that. So here we have, these are the names of some of the pickles and condiments that were found in the bags of Raghava Pandit. Mango mustard pickle, ginger mustard pickle, hot spicy pickle, lime and mango pickle, amrakoli pickle, dried ground mango, sliced dried mango, mangoes preserved in oil, and dried mango. Then, with great attention, Damayanti also made a powdered, dried, bitter vegetable preparation, shukta. The instruction is given by Krishna Das Kaviraj here, do not disregard shukta because it is a bitter preparation. And I don't know how many of you had the fortune or misfortune, depending on your taste buds, to eat shukta, but it is very, very bitter. Now, Krishna Das Kaviraj says, do not disregard shukta because it is a bitter preparation. The Lord derived more happiness from eating this shukta than from drinking panchamrita. Now, many of you may have had the experience of seeing an abhishek for the deities. Panchamrita is when they combine milk and yogurt and ghee and honey and sugar and pour all of that together over the Lord. That combination is called panchamrita. Oh. So the panchamrita is very, very tasty. But it is seen as not even as tasty as the bitter shukta melon was to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is important. Since Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the personality of Godhead, he takes the spirit in which things are done, accepting the love as the gift that is given. We were just speaking about this. He therefore derived great pleasure from the dried bitter leaves of shukta and from the mustard sauce, pickles, and preparations given by Damayanti. Because of her natural love, Damayanti considered the Lord to be an ordinary human being and therefore worried that he might become sick from overeating and get dysentery. She prepared shukta for him since it diminishes the mucus which accumulates in the digestive system, causing dysentery. Damayanti's affectionate attitude brought great pleasure to the Lord. So not only do we get a lesson on all the proper bitter and pungent pickles, but we get a lesson on what their purpose is in aiding the digestion. So this is the wonderful thing of Chaitanya Charitamrita. It is a complete literature. Mahaprabhu carefully praised the extent of Raghava Pandit's devotion to his entire entourage. As of course you know, Mahaprabhu was staying there at that time, and he would just always speak about the devotees. And so to all of his associates there in Puri, he gave great descriptions of Raghava Pandit's glories. And he then began to speak about the coconut offerings that Raghava Pandit made. Now this is a very important point, so you have to pay close attention here. Raghava Pandit, keep in mind he lived in Bengal, in Panihati. And what do they have in Bengal everywhere? Palm trees. What do palm trees give? Coconuts. So Raghava Pandit had many, many coconuts growing in his garden, in his yard. But it mentions that what he did was he went elsewhere from afar and bought the most expensive and highest quality coconuts so that those could be offered to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Not only the coconut itself, but the coconut juice, the water within the coconut. It mentions that Raghava Pandit never offered anything to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that was not of the highest quality. So much so, it says, that paying a high price for the best produce, he would get mangoes, jackfruit, bananas, and other fruit from distant villages to offer to his Mahaprabhu deity. Now this brings two things to point. First of all, he was one of the first people to worship a deity of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This deity is still currently found in that part of Bengal. And second of all, that for the pleasure of Mahaprabhu, he would even pay a high price and import things from somewhere else. Now, of course, nowadays there's a popular mood towards eating locally. You know, just growing locally what grows there and like that, and just eating naturally and with the earth and in this way. But we see here the devotees of Mahaprabhu, even at great expense, they would import things from other parts of India because it would bring the greatest pleasure to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So even costing him more, he was happy to make that expense in this way. So he would make the best things. Now, one day it mentions that a servant was bringing in a coconut offering for the deity of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And as he walked through the doorframe, coconut in one hand to offer to the Lord, he touched the doorframe as he walked through it. Now, how many of us have done that? Walked through a door and reached up and touched the doorframe as we went through it, maybe as support or just to pull ourselves through or just out of a habit. Raghava Pandit became filled with anxiety on seeing the servant do this, because he thought so many people walk through that door. And when they walk through that door, it's a natural place where they brush their feet over the threshold there. And as a result of brushing their feet, the dust is going up onto the sides of the doorframe. And now the servant that has the boga for the deities in one hand has touched that doorframe and taken the dust from people's hand on his hand, from their feet on his hand. Therefore, Raghava Pandit considered that this boga is no longer to be offered to the Lord. It is not pure enough. This is how pure he was in his consciousness of what should be offered. He did not want to see that this was offered to the Lord. And he told the servant, you take that out, it is now unsuitable, and you throw that away at a distance. Now, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments on this, because some people would criticize that here Raghava Pandit is paid top dollar, or top rupee, or top, what were they, little conch shells called? Anyway, he's paid top price for these valuable and expensive coconuts and had them brought in from somewhere else. And then simply because somebody touched the door frame, he considers them offerable and throws them out. So maybe he's a little bit of, what is the word here? It's got an obsessive-compulsive neurosis. An obsessive-compulsive disorder, we would call it nowadays. You know, oh, he touched something, it was dirty, he's got to wash his hands, and he throws it away, he's got to go back and start over. You know, they do papers and stories and interviews about people like this. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati warns that in case someone should happen to think like that, that Raghava Pandit was eternally a perfected servant of Krishna, not someone with some type of neurosis or disorder about cleaning or cleanliness. Nor was he a low-level devotee who artificially projected transcendental qualities upon material things. He served the object of his worship, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, without the slightest hint of any type of materialistic consideration, and was completely absorbed in a transcendental mood of service. So he only saw this is appropriate or this is not appropriate for the Lord. So in this way, he arranged like that. So after some time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had taken up his residence in Puri, and the devotees were coming regularly there to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from Bengal. And at one point, Mahaprabhu asked Nityananda, don't come anymore. You stay in Bengal and preach. You get married, stay in Bengal and preach, and the devotees don't have to come so often like that. So Nityananda was instructed like this to return to Bengal. So as he was coming back into Bengal, he was on his way, and he was wandering through the valley of the Ganges, and he became attracted by remembering that we're near to the place of Raghava Pandit. Raghava Pandit has such a wonderful attitude of pure devotional service, and his home is just here in Panihati, so let us go and visit him. So along with the three Ghosh brothers, it mentions the Ghosh brothers by name, Madhava, Govinda, and Vasudev Ghosh. Now, Madhava, Govinda, and Vasudev Ghosh, these boys, the Ghosh boys, they were expert kirtaniers. Sometimes I think of some of our own three brothers here. You know, what do they call themselves? The Mayapur singers?
Mayapuris.
The Mayapuris. These boys here we have in Alachua, these young men, not boys, but they're like the Ghosh brothers, very, very expert and attached to the process of chanting. So, Sri Nityananda Prabhu was traveling with the Ghosh boys, Madhava, Govinda, and Vasudeva, And they were all singing very wonderfully and having kirtan, and Nityananda was dancing quite ecstatically. And Nityananda was absorbed in some trance-like state, and he started to dance. And when he finished dancing, he found that they had come to the home of Raghava Pandit. So after he was dancing, the kirtan was continuing on, and Nityananda did what? He did the most amazing thing. He sat right down on the altar of the deities of Raghava Pandit in his home. Right onto the altar. And then he encouraged his entire entourage to perform the Abhishek ceremony. So Raghava Pandit brought into his own home. We were just talking Panchamrita, all the different ingredients for bathing. And they performed an elaborate Abhishek ceremony right there on the altar to worship Lord Nityananda. So after the bathing ceremony was finished, they dried Lord Nityananda, dressed him in fresh cloth, put a garland on him just as you would do for the deities. And then they again sat him back down on the throne, and Raghava Pandit held a parasol or an umbrella over his head. So a very, very miraculous thing happened at this exact moment, is that Nityananda is still in a very trance-like state and engaging in this kirtan, suddenly broke the trance and turned to Raghava Pandit. He said, "Bring me a garland of kadamba flowers." Kadamba flowers, very common. But Raghava Pandit said, "My dear Lord, it is the wrong time of year. There are no kadamba flowers. The tree is not blooming at this time of year." So Nityananda said, "My dear Raghava," he said, "you simply go outside of your yard and you look around. I think you will find kadambas." So Raghava Pandit went out to the front of his house, and what did he find? Did he find that the kadamba tree was producing flowers out of season? No. He found that the lime tree was producing kadamba flowers. The lime tree was giving kadamba flowers. So he collected all of the kadamba flowers, and he made a very beautiful garland, and he brought it back in, and Nityananda was smiling very big like this, and he put the kadamba garland onto Nityananda. Now, at this moment, Nityananda was smelling the kadamba flowers, and then dropped the garland, and he went, "I smell the most wonderful thing." He said, "I smell the Damanaka flowers." Now, here in America or in the West, we don't know, but the Damanaka flower is a very, very wonderful flower that only grows in Puri. So he said, "I smell the Damanaka flowers." There's only one person who wears a garland of Damanaka flowers. That is Mahaprabhu. I'm smelling the garland of Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu must be here. And in this way, it mentions that Nityananda personally brought Mahaprabhu there. Because remember, at the beginning we said there are 3 places where Mahaprabhu always is. And where was one of those? Where Nityananda is dancing. And Nityananda was dancing in an ecstatic trance. So Mahaprabhu came. And soon the entire house became filled with a mixture of Kamadaka flowers and Kadamba flowers. It was very, very amazing. So after some time, it mentions that the kirtan stopped. And then at this time, this is when Raghava Pandit, when the Lord sat down, and at this point, Raghunandana Das Goswami came to the area. And Raghunandana Das had arranged for this grand festival. This all coincided together of the chipped rice and dahi feast. And we've spoken at length about that, and we're running short on time, so we're not going to go into the full Chir Dahi festival, although you can hardly think of Panihati without discussing the Chir Dahi festival. But this was at the time when the Chir Dahi festival took place in the morning and at noontime, and great feasting was done. And then when that was finished, Nityananda adjourned back to the house of Raghava Pandit, and at the house of Raghava Pandit, then he took more feasting because of the wonderful preparations cooked by Raghava Pandit and his sister Damayanti. So in this way, it mentions Raghava Pandit in connection with many, many pastimes. A few of the other pastimes it mentions him in connection with was the cleaning of the Gundisha temple, the Rathayatra pastimes, the water sport pastimes at the Indradumna Sarovara in Jagannath Puri. He was associated with Sarup Damodar in Jagannath Puri as well. And so in this way, these are some of the pastimes Raghava Pandit is connected with. Now, Raghava Pandit wrote one very wonderful book, and that book was called the Krishna Bhakti Ratna Prakash, or the splendor of the jewel of devotion to Lord Krishna. Now, very, very long book. It has, what is it? Trying to remember, I believe it's 19 chapters, each filled with many, many verses in glorification. But I want to read what Raghava Pandit has written at the end of this book, the last 2 or 3 chapters. Renouncing everything, my dear sir, please worship Lord Krishna's transcendental lotus feet, which are worshipped by Brahma and the demigods. I beg you, please study this rare book. This book should not be shown to anyone who is adverse to Lord Krishna. This book should neither be shown to one who is impious, one who is a great fool, one who is proud of his so-called knowledge and learning, one who is an offender, one who is a worshipper of the demigods, one who is a non-devotee, one who is a materialist hankering for sense gratification, one who is a blasphemer, an atheist, or a person in the mode of ignorance, as well as an egotistical person. This book should be given to those persons whose mind is pure and who serve the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, those who are devoted to their spiritual master, who are peaceful and always situated in truth. So this is the high nature and quality of the book that is written by Raghava Pandit. Now this caused me to think about one thing, certainly in no way to diminish the statements of Raghava Pandit, but how magnanimous was our Srila Prabhupada. That all of these different types of books Srila Prabhupada brought and made available to personalities in the Western world. So glorious is our Prabhupada. So, we're going to move on to the final person of this evening's presentation. And we're running a little bit later than usual, but we're going to continue here. I see I've sparked quite a conversation on eating in the chat room. Everyone's talking about their fasting habits and their eating habits. This is what happens when you discuss the Purushottama pastimes. So the third personality we're going to speak about is Raghunandana Thakura. Raghunandana Thakura also happens to be the third member of what's called the Chaturatma. The Chaturatma, for those of you who may not be aware, are the 4 original expansions from the Lord. When Vishnu expands, he expands into 4 personalities, and that third expansion is Pradyumna. Now that Pradyumna expands into the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan as one of the intimate gopi friends of Radha and Krishna. And that personality expanded into the personality of Raghava Pandit in Chaitanya Lila. This information is given in the Gaura Gonadesha Tipika, as we've quoted many times from Kavi Karnapur. Raghunandana was also born into a family of physicians or doctors. His father's name was Mukunda, and we're going to speak a little bit about Mukunda here because Mukunda is a very, very important personality. Mukunda was his father. Mukunda was one of 3 brothers: Mukunda, Madhava, and Narhari Sakar Thakur. Narhari Sakar Thakur is a very famous personality that we're going to speak about in a few weeks from now. These were 3 brothers from Sri Khanda. Sri Khanda is one of those amazing places in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu where just unlimited, powerful, and amazing and wonderful devotees came from. Excuse me. There we go. Sri Khanda. If you ever get the chance in this lifetime, you should visit Sri Khanda. So these 3 brothers, Mukunda, Madhava, and Narhari, they lived in Sri Khanda. The eldest of the brothers was Narhari Sakar Thakur, who became very, very famous. Now, the brother Mukunda describes that Mukunda was a physician for the Shah, for the king. He was engaged in government service, as we've discussed many times. Many of the different personalities from the Lord's pastimes were, by circumstance, forced into service of the different rulers. Excuse me, apologies. You can cut that. So, there's an example given of the amazing nature of Mukunda. One time Mukunda was attending to the king, to the Shah, as his court physician, and the Shah was being fanned by one of his servants with a peacock fan. And when Mukunda saw that peacock feather, Mukunda was sitting a little bit lower than the king on a kind of one about like a half asan. You know, you have the big royal throne, and you have a little half asan. And Mukunda was sitting there conversing with the king about different physician-type discussions. And when he saw the peacock fan swaying back and forth, he was immediately reminded of the Lord and the peacock feather that adorns the head of the Lord. And upon seeing this, he was reminded of the Lord's pastimes. And upon thinking the Lord's pastimes, he fainted dead away and fell off his asan. Very quickly, the king had someone come to his side. He said, "Is he dead? What has happened to him? Mukunda's lying on the ground." And so gradually they managed to bring Mukunda back to his external consciousness. And the king said, "My dear physician, you are a doctor. What is the nature of your disease?" And Mukunda said, "Oh, I am not greatly ill. It is nothing very serious." The king said, "But what is the cause of your behavior?" Hiding his real ailment, which of course was feeling separation from Krishna, he said to the king, "Well, I have a little bit of epilepsy, and I just had a bout. It just, so you don't worry about it. It's really nothing at all. Don't be concerned about it." Now, he did his very best to hide these devotional sentiments from the king, but the king was not entirely an impious individual. The king was not entirely an impious individual, so he could understand that there was something more subtle, more spiritual going on. So he said to Mukunda, "Okay, anyway, you take the rest of the day and you retire to your residence and take the day to yourself," like that. So in this way, this was the father of Raghunandana Thakura, very advanced devotee. Now it mentions that when Raghunandana Thakura was born, that his uncle Narhari Sakar Thakur took great interest in raising and educating the child from a very young age. And when we speak about Narhari, we'll hear more about what an amazing personality he was. But he took a lot of care and influence over Raghunandana. And the influence and care that Narhari would have would be greatly beneficial. It mentions that in Raghunandana's heart, his only work and his only purpose was to serve the interest of Krishna. That he had no other thought in his heart except anything else. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. All right, I'm sorry. I got sidetracked by the guys in the chat room. All right. So Raghunandana Thakura was just fully satisfied in serving Krishna. And it mentions that from his early childhood, he was always engaged in serving the family deity. And there's a very amazing story, which I'm going to tell, and it's quite astounding. It's one of my favorite stories in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya's devotees. So Mukunda, as I mentioned, was a doctor. And they had a family deity that was worshipped. And they lived in Srikanda. And so Mukunda had to go away to the next village to attend to some medical needs of someone. He was called for. So, but it was going to be gone for most of the day. So Mukunda said to his son Raghunandana, he said, "When it is time for the lunch offering, you please, everything's been prepared, make the plate up and place it before the deity so that he can take his meal. Very strictly, I'm instructing you to do this and not to, skip it. Don't space out and not do this. You do this service nicely." So Raghunandana said, "Yes, Father, I'll be happy." Raghunandana was a very young boy. And when I say young boy, I mean very young boy. So Mukunda, he left. So the lunchtime came and Raghunandana prepared the food on the plate. And then he set the lunch offering in front of the deity. And the deity's name was Gopinath. So he set the lunch offering in front of Gopinath. And in a very childlike way, he said, "Eat, eat." Because after all, he was told by his father that the deity should eat. You're feeding him. Don't make sure that he eats. So Raghunandana put the plate of bhoga in front of the Lord and said, "Eat, eat." But the Lord wasn't eating. I mean, the offering is done by prayers and by the Lord seeing the food. He doesn't generally, actually, visually eat. I mean, in the heart of pure devotees. At any rate. So Raghunandana saw he's not eating. And Raghunandana became a bit worried. My father has told me to feed him. If he doesn't eat, my father will come home. He'll be upset with me. I'll get in trouble. I don't want to get in trouble. Please, eat, eat. He was crying like this. And the Lord was so touched by the devotion and by the true loving sentiment of Raghunandana. He said, "All right." And he ate. And he ate every single morsel. It mentions that not a single grain of rice was left on the plate. So then Raghunandana was very happy. "Okay, thank you." He took the plate away and cleaned it and put it. So 2-3 hours later, Mukunda, the father, returns home. And Mukunda says, "My dear son, I'm back. Where's the Mahaprasad so I can have my lunchtime meal? A little late, but I'm back now." And Raghunandana says, "Well, Gopinath ate it." "No, I know that you made the offering to Gopinath. That's very nice. Now where's the prasad so I can eat my meal?" "No, father, Gopinath ate it." "What do you mean he ate it?" "No, he ate everything. You told me to feed him, and I asked him to eat, and he ate everything." And Mukunda was greatly amazed by this. He thought, this is the most incredible thing. So the next day he had to go and attend again. But this time, when he left the instruction, he was called out, and he left just Ladu to feed to Gopinath. And so he went down, but then he quickly turned back and hid at the doorway and looked. And he saw that Raghunandana went in and said to Gopinath, "Eat," and gave him Ladu. And that the Lord had Ladu in his hand and took half of it. But then the Lord looked up and saw that, Mukunda's standing in the doorway watching. So he put the hand back down and didn't eat. So to this day, many devotees go to that temple to see that half Ladu that is sitting in the Lord's hand. So in this way, Mukunda was very impressed. Now, Mahaprabhu knew all of this because, of course, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul, in the heart of all living entities. So he said to, when Mukunda and Raghunandana came with all the devotees, Narhari and Madhava and Shivananda Sain, to Jagannath Puri for the Rath Yatra, one day they were all sitting around talking, and Mahaprabhu said to Mukunda, he said, "Mukunda, please you tell me honestly, who is the Father and who is the Son? And who is the Son and who is the Father? Is Raghunandana the Son and you the Father? Or is Raghunandana the Father and you are the Son?" And Mukunda said to Mahaprabhu, he said, "My dear Mahaprabhu," I'm going to read this specifically. He says, "Raghunandana, he is my Father, and I am his Son. You may rest assured of this. Whatever devotion comes in our family originates from Raghunandana. Therefore, I see him as the Father giving the instruction in the path of devotion." And then Mahaprabhu, when he heard Mukunda's answer, he was thrilled, it mentions, and very happily said, "Yes, this is the process. He from whom we imbibe devotion, he is the Guru and will teach us what is Krishna consciousness." So this was the important point in the pastime here with Raghunandana, that Lord Chaitanya very enthusiastically supported this and said this. Mahaprabhu, of course, who's the father of Sankirtan, gave his adopted son, Raghunandana Thakur, the authority to offer the garland on the Adivas, the day before the Kirtan, to the deity there. This was some special ceremony, and in this way he showed special favor to Raghunandana Thakur. It mentions that Raghunandana Thakur was also one of the devotees, along with these others we mentioned, Purushottama and Kanai Thakur, that participated in the Katuri festival organized by Janamamata with the assistance of Narottam and Srinivas Thakur, like that. Raghunandana also had a son, and his name also happened to be Kanai Thakur. We see this a lot because, of course, they're living in different places, so you have children by the same name, not so uncommon. I think here in our Lacha community we have 3 or 4 thises and 2 that's and 1 or 3, like that, different kids with the same name. So the son of Raghunandana was called Kanai Thakur. And the descendants of that Raghunandana and Kanai Thakur still live in Srikunda. If you go there, you can actually find out some information about them. Now, some people have said that anyone who is dear to Raghunandan will win Mahaprabhu's mercy for life after life. Now, other people have said that Raghunandana is so merciful that he gives life to the most humble and fallen devotees. And then still others say, this is all quoted from the Bhakti Ratnakar, this is the way the Bhakti Ratnakar is presented, many people speaking different benedictions. And finally others say, what humility! There was no one who is the equal of Raghunandana. And then yet others will say, oh, but he is so beautiful as if he is a demigod himself. So in this way, it was very, very wonderfully glorified. Now, Raghunandana Thakura was getting to be quite elderly when Srinivas, Narottam, and Shamananda had gone and done their preaching tours. And it mentions there was one exchange between Raghunandana and Srinivasacharya prior to Raghunandana's disappearance, just a bit before. And Srinivas was becoming a little despondent because Srinivas was quoting from Narhari's Krishna Bhajamrita the following quote, that Srinivas was relaying to Raghunandana. He says, difficult times are coming, for people will succumb to various doubts in the devotional process. Narhari Prabhu has written in his Sri Krishna Bhajanamrita that once our Lord Chaitanya and his companion Nityananda Prabhu have ended their incarnation, the Vaishnavas in this age of Kali will become anxious with every passing day. Whether they are very advanced devotees, whether they are somewhat advanced devotees, or whether they are neophyte devotees, their hearts will always be filled with doubt. Now this is the verses from Narhari's Krishna Bhajanamrita. So Srinivas was hearing this and accepting Narhari as a great authority. He was becoming discouraged and doubtful about the ability to preach Krishna consciousness in the Kali Yuga. So Raghunandana Thakura encouraged Srinivas with the following words. My dear Srinivas, do not let this worry you. Lord Gauranga will accomplish many great works through you. I bless you that you will remain long period on this earth, and that you and your followers will protect the Lord's religion. Those who were opposed to devotion to Krishna will become devotees by your influence alone, and they will ultimately take shelter of you. So this is written in the Bhakti Ratnakar, which gives great descriptions about the pastimes of Srinivasacharya. So this was the encouragement that Raghunandana gave to Srinivas when he was feeling a bit despondent like that. So it mentions that as Raghunandana was preparing then to depart from this world, he turned over his Gaur Gopal deity to his son Kanai Thakur for the worship. And then slowly, it mentions, he began to not be visible to the mortal eyes. And while departing from this world, he repeatedly was uttering the name Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, and then ultimately left from this world. So this is mentioned in the different prayers that glorify Raghunandana. Who is there that would not be satisfied to speak about the glories of Raghunandana Thakura? So we're going to finish there, and we thank you for your indulgence. We've gone a bit longer than we usually do, but we really wanted to speak about these three personalities and their activities. Now, I would like to inform those of you who are tuned in live and are in the chat room that this is the last week that you will see me live for 5 weeks. I'm leaving here this weekend and going to Vrindavan, where I'll be staying in Vrindavan and touring the different holy places there, and then going to Jaipur, the city of Govindaji, and I'll be associating with many devotees there. We have thought ahead, though. We don't want any of you to feel separation, and we have recorded shows in advance. Can I broadcast from Vrindavan? We're working on that, Mauricio. We're working on being able to broadcast from Vrindavan, but not this trip, maybe next year. So, we do have the Monday night shows continuing on. We will have pre-recorded broadcasts being shown. You won't have the opportunity of coming in on the chat room and speaking with us and with each other. Of course, you can go in and talk with each other about what is being said, but these will be recorded shows. And then I will begin again on the, I believe it's the 16th of November is the first Tuesday I'm back. So with that, we thank you very much for your indulgence this evening. We ask your blessings that I have a safe journey and return to the association of all the Vaishnavas through the internet. And once again, we thank you for joining us this evening in the lives of the Vaishnavacharyas. Hare Krishna.